The following is a project of our nonprofit newsroom. Support Midcoast Morning and local community-centered journalism today by signing up to be a monthly sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. It doesn't take much money to support local news.
Hello and welcome to Midcoast Morning. I'm Joe Pugh. Nanaimo's nailed down 5 specific proposals it wants to see the province take action on. This week, Council approved the resolutions that the city will bring before the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. Over the next half hour, we'll be exploring what that means, what the resolutions are, how all this works, and why you should care. We'll hear from a pair of Nanaimo City Councillors, Aaron Hemmons and Ben Gesselbrecht. Before we get into the mechanics of it, let's talk about the resolutions. As mentioned, there are 5 of them. I'll give you a brief rundown of each. There's a resolution calling on the province to fund more complex care beds. Complex care beds, complex care housing, is an initiative of the province intended to provide supports to people who are facing mental health and substance use issues, trauma, or brain injuries. The government of BC previously announced complex care services would come to Nanaimo and serve as many as 30 people by 2025. Another resolution asks the province to fund RCMP mental health liaison officers within local detachments. A third resolution calls for the creation of a provincial housing coordinator. As described in the resolution, the coordinator's job would be to work directly with people who are experiencing homelessness but are not in need of any specific supports or low-barrier housing. A fourth resolution is calling for more provincial funding towards libraries. The fifth and final resolution notes that many shelters are operating despite not meeting the building and fire codes. It asks that the province work with the Building Safety Standards branch to establish variances to the building and fire codes that would allow emergency shelters to remain open. Those are the resolutions City Council is hoping to bring to the province's attention. The next step is for those resolutions to be discussed at the annual general meeting of the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, or AVICC for short. To learn more about what that is, I spoke with Ben Gesselbrecht, Nanaimo City Councillor and First Vice President of the AVICC Executive. Can you help me explain what exactly is the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, or AVICC?
Great, yeah. AVICC, or some folks call it AVICC. It's an association of all the municipalities and regional districts for the Vancouver Island and coastal region. So what an association is basically each municipality is a member or a regional district. So the regional district is a member, and same with the city of Nanaimo, of this association. And really each councillor and mayor is a member, and it acts kind of like a union of all the mayors and councillors. What this association does is there's an annual convention. So every year, all the mayors and councillors get together, usually in Victoria or Nanaimo, and there's a convention where municipalities will put forward resolutions of things that they would like to see changed at the provincial government level in terms of, funding for parks, or change in policy around how zoning works in the municipality, or how you divide up the cost for paying for RCMP budgets. Anything to do with the business of municipality regional district is governed by the province. And so you're constantly meeting the provincial government to update its legislation or change how it funds things so that you can deal with issues that arise. And so each year, regional districts and municipalities will put forward resolutions that are meant to give direction for the association executive to lobby the province and meet with the ministers of education or transportation or whatever the issue is to push these issues so that changes can happen. So the somewhat common in the sense that the area associations, so there's like AVICC, there's one for the interior regions, there's one for the lower mainland. Resolutions first go there to be debated. And so you kind of have like a regional debate. So we get together, City Victoria councillors are there, Powell River councillors and regional district directors from Comox. Everybody's got the resolutions and they go on the floor and you debate whether this merits being something that we need to push the provincial government on. There's a vote, and if it gets adopted by the association, that resolution gets bumped up to the provincial level where it's debated. So for example, this year City of Nanaimo is asking for the province to increase funding for complex care beds for people that are, street entrenched and suffering, complex issues of head injuries and mental health issues. The City of Nanaimo put forward this resolution. It's going to go to AVICC, where it'll be debated by all the regional municipalities and local governments. If it gets adopted there, then AVICC will forward that resolution to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, which is basically the same thing, but everybody in the province now gets together once a year in Vancouver usually, sometimes it's in Whistler, and there is a provincial debate for these resolutions to be adopted. And if it passes there, then the provincial union, UBCM, will then take issue with those items and bring them forward to the province to ask for action on.
You're listening to Midcoast Morning. This week, Nanaimo City Council submitted 5 resolutions for consideration by the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. Right now, we're hearing from Nanaimo City Councillor Ben Gesselbrecht, who's explaining what exactly that means.
Sometimes there are resolutions that are just regional in nature, and it's not provincial wide. So for the complex care bed thing, that's provincial wide. It'll go all the way. But sometimes it'll be like, the AVICC, the area association, would like to see, funding be put into the island corridor rail. Well, that's not a provincial issue. That's something that's just on the island. Then the AVICC executive, that, for example, myself, if that passed, we would take it on behalf of our sole region towards like the Minister of Transportation. We'd have a meeting with them, lay out the reasons why, and demonstrate. And for ministers and the province, it's really useful information, because if a resolution is adopted by the area association or by UBCM, they can tell like, oh, this has got a lot of support. Like if you're a minister and you have a resolution come and it's been adopted, and all the municipal and regional district directors and mayors have voted and approved this, it gives you a pretty good idea that there's a lot of support, because these mayors and councillors represent their communities. And so you're wise to pay attention to this, because this is a politically relevant topic. And so it's a way annually for our region to let the province know what we need and what could be done to improve the lives of our community. The AVICC puts on its annual convention, and then it will either lobby for regional issues, or it'll move those resolutions towards the provincial union, UBCM, where the UBCM executive, should a resolution be approved by the provincial members, will go towards the province.
Would it be fair to say that these 5 resolutions from Nanaimo City Council are maybe the 5 things we most want to bring to the province's attention and advocate for?
Yeah, I would say that, the issue on our street with folks living within homelessness, having, significant proportion of folks, dealing with complex health issues, drug addiction, head injuries, mental health. That is the social disorder and the suffering from all this is what's affecting our communities the most. And, I think that's reflected in the type of items that, Nanaimo at least has brought forward to be discussed at the regional and provincial level.
Certainly, and to remind folks, there are 5 resolutions. One of them is about complex care beds, funding for complex care beds. One of them is about funding for mental health liaison officers who can attend to, in place of or in addition to police when there are calls for folks in mental health crisis. There's a call for a provincial housing coordinator, one about emergency shelters in the building and fire codes, and then one about funding from the province for libraries. How would you maybe frame the importance of these resolutions, both in their content and the form of like what happens to them next? What would you say to the average citizen of Nanaimo about why they should care about these resolutions?
Yeah, it's a great question. You got the complex investment in complex care beds. You've got, investment in mental health liaison officers. You got an investment in provincial housing coordinator. And then you got this, provincial core funding for evolving public libraries, which may seem kind of separate, but in fact, all these are the same thing. And I think for municipalities, especially as the needs of our communities grow, and the nature of the issues change, for example, this homelessness, the social crisis that we're in, which is spilling out into the libraries, we can only raise so much money as a municipality through property taxes. And, you always hear people complaining every year about increased property taxes. Well, it's the only means really for a municipality to raise money to deal with the issues that we're being asked to deal with. And what happens, just the way that things have evolved, is that you'll hear this term provincial downloading of responsibility. So as social problems increase, the province, is trying to figure out how to deal with them, and it might be better dealt with at the local level. For example, we just, are much closer to the issue. We control the fire department budget, the RCMP budget. We control, we know where the good sites for putting shelters are, or, where the specific issues are. And so a lot of things make sense for the municipality to coordinate. Well, we don't actually get the provincial tax revenue through income that could actually afford to do this. And so there's this constant battle of the municipality saying like, well, okay, province, if you want us to deal with these things, you got to provide us the resources to do it. You can't just say, oh yeah, you need to deal with hiring a police officer who specializes in mental health issues because you're in charge of the RCMP budget, when actual health and mental health issues that are a provincial issue. And so if you want us to sort of deal with this indirectly, you need to put the cash up front to deal with it. And so all these resolutions have to do with saying to the province, like, this responsibility is falling on us, which is sort of your responsibility. You need to provide the cash and resources for us to move ahead, or ante up yourself. For example, with like a provincial housing coordinator, like housing is a provincial responsibility, but you always hear in Nanaimo, like, we're citing and buying properties to build housing on, and we work closely with provincial agencies. But who are the people that are actually dealing with the folks on the street, or who are the shelters or the outreach workers dealing with to coordinate moving people from, areas like the street or whatever, or shelters, into more permanent housing? There isn't exactly that role. And so, that's the provincial housing coordinator ask that we have going forward, is that asking the province to take responsibility and properly resource the function that we need to deal with this crisis.
Is there anything else you think it's important to bring to this conversation today?
I think that just, highlighting that, it's not always discussed, but council, and there's a lot of mechanisms by which we're sort of constantly raising these key issues of the community forward with our provincial counterparts and meetings with ministers and work to move forward the needs of our community. And I appreciate, the segment, discussing what AVICC does, how Nanaimo is participating in that regional advocacy process.
Well, Councillor Gesselbrecht, thank you so much for taking some time to help explain it.
Right on.
Nanaimo City Councillor and first Vice President of the AVICC Executive, Ben Gesselbrecht.
Midcoast Morning is made possible by the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Support Midcoast Morning and CHLY's nonprofit newsroom today by becoming a sustaining donor at chly.ca/donate. Local news can't survive without your support. Another way to help us out is to share this show with your friends and tell them why they should support us. Finally, if you're listening to the podcast edition of Midcoast Morning, go and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast feed you use. It helps people find us.
Today on the program, we're diving into Nanaimo's resolutions to the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities, or AVICC. We just heard from Ben Gesselbrecht about what the AVICC is and what the pathway is for these resolutions to make change. If you're just tuning in, basically, City Council has agreed on 5 resolutions calling on the province to do specific things. In April, there's going to be a big meeting of local governments from across Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast. Each will have brought their own resolutions. They'll vote and decide which ones they want to take further. From there, resolutions might go to the Union of BC Municipalities, made up of, you guessed it, local governments from across BC. If the resolutions make it past that step, the UBCM will take them to the province to ask for action. That's the how. Now let's talk about the what. There are 5 resolutions. They include calls for funding for complex care beds and mental health liaison officers. There's also a call to create a provincial housing coordinator, and a resolution asking the province to address building and fire codes so that emergency shelters aren't forced to close if they don't meet them. The other resolution is about provincial funding for public libraries. It was brought forward by Nanaimo City Councillor Aaron Hemmons, who's also chair of the board of the Vancouver Island Regional Library. She joined me to share more. You brought forward a resolution related to funding for our public libraries. Can you tell me more?
Yeah, you bet, Joe. This is actually a co-sponsored resolution. It's coming forward from us at the City of Nanaimo, primarily myself as chair of Vancouver Island Regional Library, but it's also being co-sponsored by the Greater Victoria Public Library and Andrew Appleton, who is a councillor in, I'm going to say city, but I think it might be town of Oak Bay. And we're doing this together. So when AVICC comes around, we'll be lobbying as an entire island.
And can you tell me a bit about what exactly the resolution wants to achieve?
Sure. So a bit of background, Joe, is that in 2009, provincial funding for libraries was cut by 25%, and it's never been bumped up. And so what this resolution essentially is asking for the provincial government to acknowledge and recognize the diverse demands on the library system and the growing and evolving intersecting crises that libraries seem to be at the forefront of, and asking them for adequate funding to address those changing and evolving needs. So the province provided a one-time grant, which was amazing, last year, $48 million for the whole sector. Vancouver Island Regional Library received about $600,000 of that. So amazing. We're so grateful. But what we really need is not one-time funding. What we really need is a lift to our core funding, so we can balance out the demands on our municipalities, who are the primary funders of the library system, and also provide adequate supports and services that communities are asking for.
You mentioned intersecting crises and the impact or the role that the library plays in addressing them. Could you tell me a bit more about that and maybe how it plays out here in Nanaimo?
Sure. So, Joe, libraries are free for everyone. They're one of those doors that anyone can walk in and find supportive and kind people and resources that can help them navigate the world as it stands today. Downtown Nanaimo, our branch at Harbourfront, all branches struggle with some of the kind of, I hate to use the term, but social disorder that we're seeing in a lot of in downtown. And I'll just use Harbourfront branch as an example. We now have security services there. Pre-COVID, we never had that. And that's in relation to some of the populations that are using the space and just making sure that everyone is safe and good. And librarians are amazing at that. But, I don't think anyone would argue with affordability is a really big issue on people's minds. And the library addresses that for young families, addresses that for new Canadians. And so affordability issues, the homelessness crisis, the toxic drug crisis, all of these kind of play out in the lobbies of libraries. And so librarians are librarians and they're amazing. And at the same time, they're dealing with kind of these bigger social issues that show up through the front doors of the library.
So you mentioned there that, for example, the library now has security when, say, 5 years ago, that just wasn't a thing, while at the same time, the provincial stipend, annual provincial funding for libraries has remained the same since 2009. So who is paying for, say, the security service, and what does that mean if the funding pool has stayed the same in terms of other services?
Well, it just means that we tax residents more for the service. Yeah, that's the reality. When the provincial government doesn't step up, it's the municipalities that have to kick in the additional funds that we need. So 95% of the costs of Vancouver Island Regional Library are borne by municipalities, or sorry, not just municipalities, but are borne by residents in the areas that it serves. The province kicks in about 5%.
There was a similar resolution calling for more funding for libraries put forward by Powell River that was approved at last year's AVICC AGM. What can you tell me about maybe your hope for this resolution, even if it goes to the meeting and is passed?
Mm-hmm. So, Joe, one of the things I've learned about being a local elected official is that you have to keep asking for what you need. You can't just say it once. And this motion, I think, is continuing the conversation from Powell River from last year. And it's not, there's been actually a decade of lobbying at AVICC and at UBCM for this kind of funding increase. So we're GVPL and VIRL are certainly not the first ones to enter into this fray, but we're absolutely continuing that conversation.
And this is, of course, one of 5 resolutions that City Council on Monday put forward. First of all, broadly speaking, is there anything you can say about the totality of these resolutions and any overall themes?
I think the themes, Joe, would be that we continue to bring forward items to AVICC and then hopefully pass through UBCM and go up to the province. We continue to put forward things that matter to this community. So resolutions around housing, resolutions around shelter, resolutions around impacts of library services fits into that. In totality, I would say we continue to advocate for things that our community continues to tell us we need and that we know we need. Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like maybe the average citizen who lives in Nanaimo to know about this resolution as it relates to libraries or the situation around libraries in general?
No, I think the resolution speaks for itself. But if I were to, if I had the ear of the public right now, I would say that library cards are minimally valued at $700 a year. So that's cost avoidance in subscriptions, in streaming services, and in all sorts of things. So when we talk about the value that libraries bring to community, it is actually, we have a dollar figure on it, and it's significant. It's particularly significant for those who are struggling to make ends meet in our community. So we average out about 30% of the population of the Vancouver Island Regional Library are considered active users. And I would love to see that number increase because it is such a valuable service that provides families and seniors and new Canadians and young moms and all of those groups of people that we're trying to support with an opportunity to access free resources. that they don't have to pay for, and with a slew of amazing librarians there to help them navigate it. So if I were to kind of share anything about this, is to continue to encourage people to use their library, because it is an amazing resource.
Councillor Hammonds, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with me.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Nanaimo City Councillor and Vancouver Island Regional Library Board Chair, Aaron Hammonds. That's our story for today. I hope you can join me on Friday when we'll be taking a look at Lunar New Year in Nanaimo. Here's a sneak peek as Cecil Fung shares a bit about the Year of the Dragon.
The Year of the Dragon is special in that in all of our history in the last 5,000 years, the emperor, with his mandate from heaven, is the Dragon King. So people born in the Year of the Dragon are supposed to be pretty regal and very special people that they are smart, intelligent, athletic, mobile, and leaders. They are supposed to learn to be leaders.
Cecil Fung describing folks born in the Year of the Dragon. You can hear more on this Friday's show, which is going to be all about Lunar New Year in Nanaimo. I'm Joe Pugh, host and producer of Midcoast Morning. Jesse Woodward is our executive producer, and Arby Frew is our technical advisor. You can sign up for CHLY's newsletter at chly.ca/subscribe for updates from our nonprofit newsroom and more. Our theme song is First One by local Nanaimo band Waste Management. If you have a story you'd like us to cover, email us at news@chly.ca. That's all for now. I'll talk to you on another Midcoast Morning.
Midcoast Morning would not be possible without the funding of the Community Radio Fund of Canada's Radio Meters program and listeners like you. Midcoast Morning is a project of CHLY's nonprofit newsroom. Support nonprofit journalism in Nanaimo and on the Salish Sea today by becoming a monthly sustaining donor at $5 or more per month. Support the program at chly.ca/donate. If you're already a supporter, record a voice memo telling others where you're listening from and why they too should support our work. After you're done, you can email it to us. Also, share the podcast with your friends. While Meta is blocking Canadian users from sharing news content on their Facebook feeds, you can still share our podcast directly with your friends via Facebook or Instagram Messenger. Finally, this program acknowledges and gives thanks to the Nanaimo First Nation as we broadcast and podcast from their traditional territory. Thanks for listening.